Humans? I'm old enough I remember a time before anyone knew who the Terrans were. It was after the collapse of the Galvor Empire. For generations, the Galvor had ruled the known galaxy. As ruthless as the Galvor were, once they conquered you, you were just glad they weren't xenophobic or didn't believe in genocide. They taxed every species they conquered mercilessly. Most systems were near destitute. We were lucky. We'd had a large enough merchant marine when the Galvor came that despite the tariffs the Galvor levied, we maintained our quality of life. They conquered us long before I was born. I grew up a citizen of the Galvo Empire. For 10 years the Galvor were acting strange. Our few interstellar cargo ships brought whispered words of war. Then one day, all the Galvor military personnel and ships left, all across the known worlds. They just left. 2 years later, a Galvor ship entered our system. I was ensign in the civilian space traffic control service. A Galvor Republic astrogation and exploration ship exited hyperspace and requested transit instructions to our primary orbital installation. My commanding officer, a civilian service admiral, allowed me to sit in when the Galvor captain entered his office. The Galvor was here to give us copies of charts. What race held what territory, navigational hazards, things like that. My commanding officer popped the chip into his terminal and stared at it a moment. "Where are all your worlds?" My CO asked. "You've only got 17 worlds." I was surprised at that. Before the Galvor had 20 worlds. "Those worlds are glass," the captain replied gruffly. "Who are these Terrans? Did they glass your worlds?" I was able to look over the admiral's shoulder. A huge piece of space, larger than even the Galvor's empire, had been simply said Terran. "You should stay out of their way," the Galvor officer replied. The Galvor left soon after that. The government debated endlessly. What if the Terrans were brutal? What if they came here? Eventually, it was decided we needed to colonize other worlds, just in case. Nearly 15 years to the day when the Galvor left, we entered a star system my people had charted over a century before, just prior to the Galvor finding us. We had wanted to colonize it then, but first the war with the Galvor, then their taxes and tariffs, made it economically impossible to fund an expedition. There were 5 starships in orbit around the inhabitable planet. Transponders blazing like stars declared they were ships of the United Terran Confederacy. We were terrified. Word had gotten around by then that the Terran Confederacy had defeated the Galvor Empire, forced it to rebuild itself into the Galvor Republic. The Galvor had been monsters to many species, ruthless and deadly. In hushed whispers, everyone asked, "What kind of monsters must the Terrans be to defeat the Galvor?" I was on the bridge, now a young lieutenant in service of the military, when the Terrans made contact. They wanted to know what we were doing in the system. The civilian head of our expedition informed her. I remember the captain and the governor-elect discussing if the Terran was male or female. We were there to colonize the planet. The human asked us the date of claim we had on the system. If everyone hadn't been nervous before, they were now. The governor-elect, far more confidently than he could have felt, informed the human of our date of survey that we had intended to colonize the planet over a century ago. But the Galvor had prevented it. For 20 minutes, the Terran reviewed the documents she'd asked us to provide. You could have cut the air on the bridge with a knife. Then finally, she said an expletive and shrugged. "I'm afraid you'll have to give us a few weeks to get our people and tech off planet. We'll leave the buildings for you if you want. If not, we'll use them for orbital strike practice." The bridge was silent as a tomb before the governor-elect replied, You can leave the buildings." A few years later, the Terrans contacted us again. They wanted us to arbitrate a similar colonial dispute with the Moumoir. We'd had a bit of contact with the Moumoir over the years, but we weren't close. I was a commander by then and was part of the delegation sent. The human admiral approached us shortly before the arbitration was to begin. "We'd like you to rule in favor of the Mumwar," he said. We were confused. Was this some kind of ploy for them to go to war with us and the Mumwar? My captain asked just that. The human shook his head and looked at him gravely. "Look, we know since we defeated the Galvor, there's a lot of fear and mistrust in the galaxy where we're concerned. We want you to rule for the Mumwar for a number of reasons. First, to establish a precedent for resolving colonial disputes peacefully. Second, we want to show the rest of the galactic community that we're peaceful. Third, to earn some goodwill." Though my delegation felt the Terran's claim was stronger, we headed their wishes and allowed the Mumwar to have the planet. All was well for the next 10 years. I became a captain in my own right, and was given a small scout ship and sent to find new worlds that were inhabitable. During this time, I paid close attention to what the Terrans were doing. 5 other colonial disputes came up. 2 the Terrans simply walked away from. 2 they stood their ground and maintained their claim was stronger. The last they called for arbitration again. The humans got that planet too. Everything was boringly normal during that time. Then I entered a system that my people hadn't yet given a name. The Terrans were there. They invited my ship's company aboard one of their own for a visit. Ever curious, I obliged. I was enjoying a chat with their admiral. She was asking if my people would be open to diplomatic contact outside of our occasional arbitrations, when a Ithidal task force entered the system. They immediately demanded the Terrans leave. The Terran admiral addressed the Ithidal commander from the wardroom without asking me to leave. "By what right and how old is the claim your people have on this star system?" "I am the first Ithidal in this system, and I claim it by right if I have 20 ships and you have 5. "I see. Well, I have no choice but to refute your claim and ask that you withdraw." What the Ithidal said next is best left unsaid in polite company, but for the sake of posterity we'll outline it. He described the Terran in unflattering terms and informed her of his intent to forcefully mate with her with such vigor her next 10 generations of female descendants would be impregnated. She was not amused and terminated communication. She asked that we leave for our own safety, though upon my request, she did relay all communications between her ships and the Ithidal. Despite repeated warnings from the humans that they were already within weapons range, the Ithidal kept coming. Finally, just before the Ithidal were within their own weapons range, the humans attacked. Despite being outnumbered 4-1, the Ithidal were wiped out. The battle lasted less than an hour, with only a single Ithidal ship remaining. It was a colony ship full of civilians. The Terrans told them to return to their people and tell them that this system was in the control of the Terrans. The Terran-Ithidal war had begun. Including the battle I witnessed, the Terran-Ithidal war lasted only 3 battles. A fleet of Ithidal ships arrived in the contested system and meet a fleet of Terran ships. With a 4-1 advantage and the Terrans holding fire until almost exposing their ships to return fire, the Ithidal had been unable to inflict any casualties. Facing the Terrans with even numbers, and the Terrans proving that their range advantage wasn't just a boast, the battle ended predictably. That very same Terran fleet then moved to the Ithidal home system, and in the 3rd and final battle of the war, they crushed its entire infrastructure. The Ithidal no longer leave their home system. Our ambassador asked them after it was all said and done why they'd pushed for a confrontation. We thought the humans were weak, giving up systems allowing someone else to decide who gets them. Weakness. But they defeated the Galvor. Did they? I never read an official statement from the Galvor Empire. Did you?